So at the end of day 5 of the second test in Adelaide, it's time once again to Ask George. Sam Blackledge asks, since 2001, only one touring side has won an Ashes series. So are we being too harsh on England?
Hello, Sam. Well, I think that question went on to say, does Australia have the period of navel gazing similar to England when they lose? And the answer is yes, they do. They take it very badly. And the other thing is that you don't really see Australia lose series in quite the same way. I mean, the last one here was 4-0, the one before that was 5-0. I think Australia's worst ever result was 3-0 in 2013, and they won 5-0 a few months later. So I think that the general theme of the question is quite sensible. You know, sometimes you play teams that are simply better, and you just have to accept that, you know, England aren't as good at cricket as Australia, and there's some sense in that. But in this game, for example, Australia were lacking their two best bowlers. England failed to get 250 at either innings on a flat wicket. They continue to drop catches. They continue to overstep with the ball. You know, they're making pretty basic errors. And as Joe Root pointed out, they're making basic errors repetitively. And no, I think it's reasonable to not accept that that's good enough. So I take the point, but I don't think we should ever accept losing that well. You can accept it graciously, but you can also look at the reasons it happens and not be too comfortable with it. I think it's pretty good to be uncomfortable with losing.
So Tom Burridge asks, at this point, should we just call up some young players and use the rest of the series to give them some experience for the future?
No, well, Tom, the thing is that Ollie Pope is probably the most exciting young batter in England. I mean, he's averaging 70-something for Surrey in first-class cricket. And my worry is that if he's not going to make it, who the hell is? Because he's head and shoulders above other people you would think should be vying for that position. It's not as if England haven't tried young players. You know, Zach Crawley's here, but I think he's averaging 11 this year. You know, he's earned his drop in, much as I like him. You know, who are these young players who are demanding to be selected ahead of Jimmy Anderson and Stuart Broad? I don't know. I don't see them. So I don't think you can just throw people in and hope that the experience will be beneficial, because the experience actually might be scarring. So no, I don't think there are easy answers, I'm afraid, Tom.
Cricket Analytics asks, should James Vince come into the team?
Completely reasonable. You know, he was a bit unlucky last time. You know, he got 80 odd in the first test, was run out. Got an impossible ball in Burr. Do you remember? He got 50 towards the end of the series. Then went to New Zealand, got 76. Ed Myth decided he didn't fancy him as a player, really, and dropped him. I can't remember who he was dropped for. Maybe for Joss Butler. I mean, everyone is. And I think, you know, he does have good qualities. You know, he clearly has time to play the ball. He clearly has the strokes. There's a lot to like about James Vince. You know, equally, he had 13 tests, averages in the 20s, never scored 100. It's a completely reasonable selection, not least because he's just down the road, and I wouldn't be at all surprised if it happened. I think they are looking at reinforcements, and that's not one of the names I've heard, but I would have no issue with that at all.
Andre Leslie asks, do you think Marcus Harris will be in the Australia 11 for the Boxing Day test?
No, I don't, Andre. He shouldn't be.
Max Edwards
I think the question actually said, am I right in saying the question actually said starting 11?
Starting 11, yeah.
Son. Yeah.
11.
It's cricket, yeah? Not football.
Max Edwards asks Ollie Pope what's happened.
I don't know. The first sign I had that anything was the matter with Ollie Pope was during the 2020 lockdown series. And we did a press conference with him, and he kept on saying something about how difficult he was finding being in the ground and opening the curtains, you know, of the hotel at Old Trafford, it must have been, and looking out onto the pitch. How you can never get away from cricket. And the way he spoke about it reminded me of Trotty when he was struggling, to be honest. And there just, if I'm honest, I had a couple of alarm bells just then. I'm not saying that it's the same or similar, but that's just my honest recollections of that conversation. And that was midway through 2020. honestly, I thought that fella had nailed it. I thought Ollie Pope. When we were watching the Port Elizabeth test, I remember turning to my colleagues in the press box and saying, he looks better than Joe Root. And he did. During that series, he kind of batted better than Joe Root. And that's high praise. So what's gone wrong? I don't know, and I don't think anyone knows for sure, but he does seem quite anxious, quite nervous. I don't ever really feel particularly comfortable talking technique because there's so many other people who do it so much better than me. It doesn't look to me as if he's very balanced technically. Personally, I'd like to see him open up a little bit more. But, other people will have better opinions on that. I wonder if it's temperamental or technical. Generally, I think that competence leads to confidence, but not always.
I mean, is there anything linked to him sort of having he's been very in and out of the team, not necessarily all his own fault a lot of the time?
Yeah, well, you see, you could make a really strong, reasonable case for dropping him now, couldn't you? I think a lot of my colleagues would do that. I would be very, very keen not to make the mistakes that English cricket made with Mark Ramprakash and Graham Hick. And I would really, really try and stick with him. Because I think he's that level of talent. I really do. I think he's a terrific talent. And as I say, he's averaging 72. Admittedly, he plays for Surrey, and admittedly, he sometimes bats on pretty flat tracks. But, Surrey play half the games away from home, and he scores runs in them. So I would be really loath to drop him for the point that you're making, which is that you don't want to do anything to make him feel, to be looking over his shoulder. It's very difficult to get that balance right. I've no doubt he's trying, he's giving it absolutely everything. It's a real worry, that one, because I think of him as a barometer player. If he can't make it, I honestly worry about anyone in English cricket making it. I'll say again, I've said this a couple of times this week, it's about 8 years since a player came into the England side and thrived for a sustained period at Test level. That should be a worry.
TP asks, should Liam Livingstone be parachuted in, literally, to bat number 7 and bowl spin?
Well, if he is going to come, I think it's fair enough to land the plane. Something to parachute. I mean, it's odd that he's not here. I don't really understand it. I would have been inclined to have him in the squad. If not have him in the squad, have him in the Lions. They've sent all the Lions home and he's not doing the big bash. So is he ready to come out? I don't know. I can't give you a sensible answer. Would he be a reasonable selection? Yeah, I think he probably would. I mean, he could bat anywhere 6, 7 or 8, in my view. Look, he can bowl spin, but being able to bowl spin and being a test quality spinner, those aren't the same things. I think he has what it takes to make it as a batter in Test cricket, and I think he could bowl useful spin, but just be a bit realistic about what you're asking him to do if you're asking him to be a spinner. But yeah, again, he's a completely reasonable option. I wouldn't want him batting any higher than 5 or probably 6. And he could be destructive as a Test number 6. He can play.
So Deepak Rao asks, do you think playing so many tests on favourable home conditions has blinded England to the reality of what is needed to win away?
Yes, categorically yes. Super question. Sensible. They've been flattered. They're massive home track bullies. Yeah, absolutely they are. It's not just the pitches, it's the ball. I mean, I love the Duke's ball. It's the most fun ball to watch. There's no doubt about it. But they are deluding themselves into thinking they're far better than they are. If they want to be number 1 in the world, they're going to have to, and they're nowhere near, are they? They're going to have to look at doing things differently. That's Cameron Green making all that noise. Like, shall I shout over and tell him to keep it down? He could break me like a twiglet.
Pick you up with one hand.
We were calling it Village Green for a couple of days in this series, but he's obviously going to be a superstar, isn't he? He's preposterously talented.
Yes, he's in every aspect of the game, mainly because he's not that far away from the ball, regardless of where it is anyway. What does English cricket do to strike that balance between entertaining cricket with the Duke's ball and as the question refers to, prepare the team better for more difficult conditions? Yeah,
I think it comes probably down to playing on better pitches, and if they can't get it right in the next year or two, and I'm not having to go at ground staff because, when they're asked to prepare championship pitches in April, and lots of them, you're probably making an unfair request. But I think it's worth looking at the hybrid pitches and whether we could use those in championship cricket. Certainly at New Road, where somewhere I go very often, the pitches are desperate. They're just horrendous, horribly slow. Not the ground staff's fault. That place floods all the time. But the cricket there's boring and bad for batters and bad for bowlers. And I'd play it. And the hybrids that they use in white ball cricket are actually very good, very entertaining. So I would do that. And I'd get bowlers are allowed to get the ball swing with their skill and stuff. But if you make things too easy, look, everyone knows these arguments. We have a predominance of medium fast, whatever seamers who get too much assistance. We have batters who seem to flash at the ball because they think there's one coming with their name on it. And we don't have a need to develop spinners and real fast bowlers. But everyone knows this already. We know the problems, I think, largely. It's just having a will to put the solutions in place.
Not wishing to be uncharitable, but while England showed bottle today, is that really worth celebrating? Isn't that the minimum requirement, says Matt Cave?
Matt, I couldn't agree with you more. I've just filed a piece which would be published imminently, which basically says that. It's almost like, I was going to say you were peering over my shoulder, but it's so much more likely that I was peering over yours.
Simon Besk asked, if Roots is rightly criticising bowlers for not bowling full enough, was he or the coach not talking to them during the first innings?
It's a really good question. I mean, it raises that question, doesn't it? It begs the question. Why is it that they were unable or unwilling to do what they were told? I think that's a real problem, and it doesn't reflect very well on them, and it doesn't reflect very well on him. I don't know how many times I've been to Joe Root press conferences. That's the most irritated I think I've ever heard him. I know it's relatively mild, but by his standards, that was pretty critical stuff. He seemed extremely frustrated, and partially with the bowlers. It does remind me of the 2015 World Cup out here. England's seamers kept on getting through their first spell, which Broad Madison was, with okay figures, 5 overs, 15 or whatever. But they kept being asked to pitch it fuller, take wickets. England had to take wickets with the new ball. And they didn't. They seemed incapable of pitching it that half yard fuller for whatever reason. And so England moved on from them. Interesting, hey?
Is it also a little bit of an uncomfortable truth that when they did pitch it up, the captain on the field was Ben Stokes?
It is, and that is absolutely fair. There was an hour on the fourth day in the morning where they pitched it up. But then Joe Root comes back on, Ben Stokes starts bowling and pitches it short as all hell. So what do we read into that? I mean, maybe you just accept that Ben Stokes' role with the ball is different. I don't think it should be, actually. I think they massively overplay his enforcing short-pitched role. He's much better than that. He's a skillful bowler. But you are right to observe that happened for an hour on the fourth day. Yeah. And that is interesting. Look, I think Ben Stokes is about to be captain of England, isn't he? It's after this series. I think there's going to be a few go down with this ship this time. There'll be a few careers ending. Just say thank you to everyone who's asked questions. You never know how a new show like this is going to work. And it wouldn't work without the questions. They'd be very good. And we're very grateful for them. Thank you.